Let me be clear. It's Chapo, and it's me and Matt. But joining us this week is the all-time Chapo Trap House reigning guest appearance champion. It's our international global correspondent, Derek Davison. Derek, what's up?
Hey guys, thank you for having me on. Normally these days in the afternoons, I just kind of go around sniffing strange women's hair, so I didn't really have anything else to do. So I'm happy to be here.
You're a tactile guy. You know, it's through touch that we connect and learn about the world and our fellow human beings.
I'm a hugger. What can I say?
Where's Derek's hug at?
That makes me realize that Johnny Smith from the Dead Zone would get Me Too'd very quickly because he needed to touch people in order to know their future. And it would be funny if he tried to justify it and say, look, I'm not trying to cop a feel. I just want to know if you're going to die soon.
Well, can you imagine if Joe Biden had the Dead Zone abilities, how many times he would have foreseen the apocalypse from all the people he's been hugging?
Oh, yeah. No, he knows exactly how we all die. For sure.
No, but particularly in DC, how many Martin Sheen type characters from that film are surrounding Joe Biden on a day-to-day basis?
Oh, yeah.
Well, Derek, we can talk about your hugging regimen later, but you're the guy who obviously we've been obsessing over the 2020 election here in America and the 2016 election that already happened. We talk a lot about that. We have a good time, but it's easy to forget. Politics and things are going on in other countries as well. So there's some elections going on around the world. There's some interesting doings going on right now. And why don't we begin by talking about an old favorite, one of the original supporters of the show, one of our first, favorite countries, Turkey. Turkey is having a rather wild election right now.
Yes, well, they're local elections, so they're not as serious from a practical standpoint as say a presidential election or a parliamentary election or anything like that. But President Recep Tayyip Erdogan's Justice and Development Party has suffered a couple of major setbacks. They lost the mayor's race in Ankara pretty handily. They lost, it appears, the mayor's race in Istanbul by a fairly narrow margin. AKP has had both of those mayoralties basically since its inception, and its kind of Islamist predecessor parties controlled those mayoralties for a few years before AKP became a thing. Erdogan himself was mayor of Istanbul in the 90s. That was his first kind of high-profile political job. So it's embarrassing on the one hand for AKP to lose these posts, and there are some reasons, none of them hugely impactful, but there are some reasons why it hurts AKP on a more practical level. There are obviously patronage networks and political networks that revolve around these large city mayors' offices that have been important to the party in the past, and now presumably they're going to lose access to those things. And there's some indication that by virtue of the way that they won these elections, that the opposition may actually be getting its act together. One of the things that's kept AKP in power for so long has been that Turkey's opposition is sort of divided. It's kind of incompetent. They don't really know how to work together to counter AKP's dominance. And there's some indication that they may be starting to figure some things out. Mostly the results here seem to have been about the Turkish economy, which is more or less in the toilet. Erdogan made what I think was a mistake stake in nationalizing the elections instead of letting his party's candidates kind of run their own thing. He turned it into a referendum on AKP and its power, and at a time when, as they say, it's the economy, stupid. Turkey's economy is really struggling, and people are unhappy about that, especially in the big cities where they are already predisposed kind of to not like Erdogan so much. And so I think, the result here reflects mostly the frustration over the economy.
And the people who just won, like the mayors of Istanbul and Ankara, are like, how would you do? Like, what is their party? Are they the same party, or how would you characterize the opposition here?
Yeah, they're both from the main opposition party, the Republican People's Party, or CHP, and CHP is kind of. It's hard to pin down what its ideology is anymore. I mean, they've been out of power for so long. They're sort of the original Turkish political party. They go all the way back to Ataturk and the founding of the republic, and they kind of have tried to embody his principles of secularism and republicanism and, kind of authoritarianism to some degree when they've been in power. But nowadays, I mean, the party is basically like, we're not AKP. If you don't like AKP, vote for us. I mean, that's been their message, and it's hard because AKP has been so dominant in Turkish politics. Everybody else, all the other parties, are kind of revolving around them and bouncing off of them. But yeah, I mean, it's kind of a comeback to some degree for CHP, which has been struggling for a while. As I say, the Ankara election, they seem to have won pretty handily. Istanbul was won by a much smaller margin, and AKP is going to challenge that result, and it's narrow enough that it's not set in stone yet.
I mean, I did see some reports of some electoral shenanigans going on, like some ballot stuffing and things of that nature.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's kind of become par for the course. I mean, Erdogan's what they call an illiberal Democrat, which means he likes to have votes, but he doesn't necessarily care if they're fair or free.
He's not a classical liberal,
Right,
the good kind.
Right, yeah, exactly.
He's part of the intolerant left.
His strategy really is more to rig elections before they happen by denying media time to his opponents and throwing some of his opponents in prison for dubious reasons. And then, when it gets time to voting, he tends to let things play out. But I don't think he's above doing a little ballot box stuffing here and there. And there were reports of irregularities. Interestingly, AKP has been crying about irregularities and saying they've been cheated in these votes, which when you're the ruling party and you've dominated national politics for, almost 2 decades now, it's hard to really make that stick. Like if anybody's rigging the election, it's AKP.
Yeah, it's like when you control like all of the functions of democracy, it's a little hard to complain that your opponents are stealing it from you.
Right, exactly.
I mean, I would like to take a very close look at some of those voting rolls in Istanbul, because I'm suspecting that a lot of the people that voted AKP are in fact stray cats.
You say that, but I have good authority that most of the people who voted for CHP are crypto-Armenians. And as we all know, their votes don't count either.
It's either crypto-Armenians or crypto-Jews. That's the next one that'll come out.
But Erdogan is still firmly in control of Turkey. Doesn't seem like he's going anywhere anytime soon.
Oh no, yeah. I mean, he's got almost all the levers of power in the state centered in his office now. It's very hard to. It would be very hard to move him out. What I think, if there is a long-term implication for this election that has to do with Erdogan, it's mostly, again, that the economy is his Achilles heel, that his typical sort of campaign message, which is kind of angry nationalism, doesn't work terribly well when he doesn't have a kind of imminent threat that he can point to and get people riled up about. And, you know, in the long run, if the opposition can build on this, and it could be maybe the first kind of small step in building momentum for them, then, you know, it could have some long-term impact. But I think it's... I've seen a lot of takes that like, oh, this is it. It's like the beginning of the end for Erdogan. I think that's overstating it quite a bit.
Yeah, just, I mean, as soon as he gets a chance to steamroll the Kurds in northern Syria, that's going to bump him right back up, probably. He's probably pissed he couldn't do that right before the election.
Yeah, that's probably, I mean, he might have wanted to save that for a bigger election.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
But
I mean,
certainly he's got that in his bag.
I mean, he did do that the last time there was an national election,
Yes,
right?
he did.
Yes.
So, like, yeah, just basically started a war.
The last couple of times, I mean, he's gone after the PKK to help himself politically, and then, you know, he went into northern Syria and has kind of gone after the Syrian Kurds to do the same thing.
And like, as far as the American foreign policy community and planners go, I mean, where do they really stand on Erdogan? Because I mean, he seems like an interesting case where he's, you know, Turkey's a NATO member, but he's also like this severely authoritarian ruler who's allied himself with against the United States and with Russia, at least vis-a-vis Syria.
Yes. I mean, he's exactly what makes it especially weird is he's exactly the kind of guy, kind of a pompous, blowhard, right-wing dictator wannabe that Donald Trump loves. And there's evidence that, like, on a personal level, I think the two of them get along pretty well. I mean, when Trump announced back in December that he was pulling all of the U.S. soldiers out of Syria, to everybody's surprise in Washington, it was right after he got off the phone with Erdogan. And I think, you know, they were just shooting the shit, basically, and, you know, being pals. And Trump, you know, said, hey, you're my pal. I can do this for you. I can do you a favor. And he made that announcement. So, I mean, I think on a one-to-one level, they actually get along okay. But Erdogan has worn very thin with the rest of the foreign policy establishment. The big thing right now is that he's moving forward with the purchase of Russia's new S-400 air defense system. He's insistent on making that purchase, mostly, I think, to curry favor with Moscow, but also because the S-400 seems to be pretty effective.
It's a good system.
It's a great system.
It's a great system. Derek,
Let's just talk for a little bit about this. It is the state of the art in anti-aircraft technology. If you have any worry that your tactical airspace might be infringed upon by an enemy air force, just get one of these babies, folks.
Use code CRANK.
Yes. That
code CRANK420 for a 20% discount.
That code again, baseball crank 420. Use that code if you're getting any of those air defense systems. But Derek, I did see. So like, okay, so like, is this kind of like? I mean, despite the fact that the Russian air defense systems actually work and are very good.
They work and they're cheaper. That's the other thing. They're cheaper than like the Patriot, for example, which is what the US
I'm sorry, but the way that works is bad and expensive. Yeah. That's the American way of war, and everyone needs to shut the fuck up.
Well, yeah, two things. Like, didn't I see like the United States was threatening Erdogan if he goes ahead and buys these anti-aircraft missile batteries from Russia? They're like, oh. You like that? Well, guess what? We're not going to sell you any of our F-35 jets, which are like, you know, the ones that you literally can't fly if it's raining out. And like, and as Matt said, that is the perfect example of the exact opposite of the Russian. Like, we've probably spent, I don't know, an entire public education or healthcare system
$1 trillion
on the F-35, which is probably one of the worst fighter jets ever created.
A 1 in 4 chance of decapitating its pilot if they try to eject.
Yes, if they have to
1
eject.
in
That's
4.
Correct. And that's assuming they're not passed out from oxygen deprivation beforehand.
And yes, it can't fly in the rain, and they have to repaint it after every flight.
Yes, I mean, not only are we threatening not to sell him the F-35, but actually the Pentagon just a couple of days ago suspended the delivery of some material. I'm not sure exactly what parts or something related to the F-35. Turkey's supposed to take its first delivery of F-35 aircraft later this year, but it now looks like there may be a pretty good chance that the U.S. is actually going to follow through and block that delivery.
Yeah, it's like keep talking shit, buddy, or keep it up, and I'm not going to sell you my bed bug ridden mattress on Craigslist. But like this international arms sales, like despite the fact that the Russian missile systems seem to work, this just seems all just like payola, like with the Saudi arms sales. Like they're not really buying them to use them; they're just buying them to buy protection from America and Great Britain, right? And is it just like not a matter of their actually the missile systems themselves, but the fact that they're sort of, this
the
is
Saudis have taken billions of dollars out of this country, and now they must bring it back.
I mean, yeah, the purchase, I think, of the S-400 is mostly to curry favor with Russia. I mean, Erdogan really has been emphasizing his friendship with Vladimir Putin and trying to get in good with the Russians, and because the Russians don't give him any grief about things like maybe reimposing the death penalty or his authoritarianism or like killing protesters in Istanbul, and so it's just an easier relationship for him to maintain. And it's kind of still Russia's not really a great power, but they have a strong military, and they're a good friend to have in that regard. And I think the sale and his kind of rigid insistence on going through with it, despite all the grief he's gotten from not just the U.S., from the rest of NATO, really, is because he values that relationship and he wants to strengthen it.
But like it's just like the NATO and like all of the arms manufacturers associated with their side. I mean, did they just want them to buy their fucking anti-aircraft missiles?
Well, the U.S. wants them to buy the Patriot, and it's even like offered to discount the Patriot system so that the Turks could buy it on a
what the hell? I mean,
the same price.
The thing is designed to self-explode on the ground. I mean, isn't that what you want out of an anti-aircraft?
I'm just imagining like Erdogan just like stuck in a room with like a Jack Lemmon, Glenn Ross character. Be like, I'll tell you what do I got to do to put you in one of these Patriot
let me tell you
missiles?
this
Exactly. Exactly.
Let me tell you about this Patriot, folks. You really want this Patriot. Now, you can't shoot it at night, and only for the first 4 hours of the day, because then it gets a little too hot. But let me tell you, you do that in those first 4 hours, my God, you got a good 20% chance of hitting whatever you shoot at.
So
it's like you're not buying a missile defense system. You're buying a dream. You're buying peace of mind.
They just like talking to salesmen.
Yes, I mean the answer is part of this is that the U.S. wants Raytheon to make the sale instead of Russia's defense industry. There are concerns that if Russia sells the S-400 to Turkey, they're going to have technicians helping to install the system and train people, and they might get a gander at the wonderful F-35 and find out that it can't fly in the rain or some other secret that we would rather the Russians not know, and take that back to Moscow. So, I mean, there is some kind of there are some security reasons for not wanting to let these weapon systems mix. But there's there's a big chunk of this that's just why don't you buy American instead of buying Russian?
Buy American. Ford. Built Ford tough. So moving on from Turkey, there's another election happening, I think, like, what, is it next week? Or it's very, very soon in Israel. Another of our favorite countries and sponsors on this show.
Yes, next week.
It's next week?
Yes, April 9th.
And so, like, this appears that it's just like, Netanyahu, him and the Likud party have basically absorbed the insane Kahanist party into their ranks to shore up their chances of winning this election. Like, is it going to be close at all? Or, like, what's going on there?
So I haven't seen any polling on this election in a while. The last polling that I saw suggested that it could be close. Netanyahu is facing probably his biggest challenge in at least the last couple of elections, in the form of Benny Gantz, who is the ex chief of staff of the Israeli Defense Forces, and has formed his own kind of. People call it centrist. The idea of like the center in Israeli politics is so far to the
hilarious.
right that it's kind of ridiculous to call it that. But in that context, I guess they are centrist. He's formed his own party alongside a businessman named Yair Lapid, who's been a sort of fixture in the Israeli center for a while now. It's called the Blue and White Party. There has been some polling that suggests Gantz's party could finish slightly ahead of the Likud party in terms of the number of seats that it wins in the legislature. However, that technically would give Gantz sort of the first crack at forming a coalition and becoming prime minister. However, even in those polls, the ones that show that Gantz may, eke out a slim win, his mathematical path to forming a coalition, in other words, to controlling a majority of seats in the legislature, is a lot harder than Netanyahu's. So when it comes time to actually cobble together a bunch of parties, which always happens after an Israeli election, to get the number of seats that you need to form the government, Netanyahu should have an easier path to that than Gantz.
I like how they always have to do that. Oh, they got to scramble to get those necessary seats. There's like 6 guys in the Knesset. It's incredibly tiny, right? It's like 100 or something.
It's 120. 120 seats.
Adorable. I think there are more people in the New Hampshire State House than there are in the Knesset. I'm serious about that. They have a notoriously huge state house. I love the fact that there's a very good chance Netanyahu's going to get in there, even though he has a credible opponent, and he is on the verge of getting indicted. They said they were going to indict him.
Yes, he's on the verge. They decided to wait until after the election to indict him. Not that there's a fix there or anything. Yes, I mean, they decided they didn't want to interfere with the election, and so they've interfered with the election by not indicting him, even though the evidence is there to indict him.
That's the work of Attorney General James Comey.
What exactly is Netanyahu like these charges that he's faced with here? Is this just like standard political corruption or what?
Yeah, I mean, there's some kind of, accepting gifts from rich people that he probably shouldn't have accepted. There's at least one charge that's related to, he approached media company and said, in exchange, if you give me good coverage, favorable coverage, I'll be nice to you in a regulatory sense. So, he's doing a little horse trading in that regard. I mean, it's kind of standard corruption stuff, but the evidence, if it's enough to indict, I mean, the tradition historically in Israeli politics has been if you get indicted for something like this, you resign, and Netanyahu's not going to do that.
Hell no.
So that's where things stand, I guess.
You won't be in trouble until he's accused of molesting children in the basement of a falafel store.
But Likud and Netanyahu have been like the dominant political force in Israeli politics for a long time now. And such that like when times are good, they can coast along on this idea that like actually like Israel is a multi-ethnic democracy and we have Arabs who are in the Knesset or whatever. But as soon as they get under any amount of pressure, they go straight to like the insane nationalist fascist parties, and then passing that law recently that like explicitly makes it clear that Israel for the Jews only.
Yes, I mean they passed the this new national law that makes it clear that if you're not Jewish, you can still be a citizen, but you're not really a first-class citizen. You're kind of in a lower level of citizenship. Yes, I mean, Netanyahu's pattern has been anytime he's challenged internationally for Israel's treatment of the Palestinians, he comes back with, we're the only democracy in the region. Arab Israelis are treated, they're full citizens. They can do whatever they want. But as soon as it comes time for an election, he starts, giving speeches and cutting ads like, the Arabs are voting. Can you believe this? You have to do something about this, to get his base, his insanely right wing base, out to support him.
And then
this is how he
and then
whips up support.
The guys who really go buck wild are his junior partners in the coalition, the Jewish Home Party, whose ads are even more insane than Netanyahu's Likud ones. They've got two that are genuinely jaw-dropping. One of them is with Ayet Shalad, or whatever the hell.
God, that's right.
The dime, who's the justice minister,
Yes.
where it's a fake perfume ad.
Like a Calvin Klein ad.
Where the perfume is called fascism, and the punchline is at the end, she says, smells like democracy to me. And then the other one that just came out today, and that honestly...
That's jaw-dropping. This one is insane.
Well, buckle in.
Yeah,
then.
yeah.
Yeah, oh, right. Will knows what I'm talking about.
I know what you're
I don't
talking
know if you
about.
heard it. You probably heard this, Derek.
I haven't seen it.
Okay,
No.
this one is with the head. The head of the Home Party is Naftali Bennett, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And he
Correct.
did one where he picks up a dove, and a literal dove in his hand, and he scolds it for thinking that peace is good, and how you're an idiot for trying to get peace. And she shot it in the exact square where Rabin was assassinated.
Holy crap! Serious?
I saw that this morning. Like, he's standing like X marks the spot.
Yeah.
He's like it would be like, if you did like a commercial outside the book depository or whatever, just being
my
like,
God.
yeah.
I mean, they're like,
And then he's
just,
he's like seriously, like not even like
Yeah.
winking, just
No.
saying like, yeah, like we murked his ass and we were right to do it.
yeah, talk shit, get hit. Yeah,
Jesus, that's
it's
wild.
mass
I haven't
off time,
seen that
baby.
yet.
I was reading some horrible op-ed in the forward this week from an Israeli citizen who's I'm a typical Israeli liberal, and like the whole op-ed was agonizing over like, I just don't know who I'm going to vote for in this election. It's the age-old question: to Netanyahu or not to Netanyahu? And essentially the point they were making as an Israeli liberal is that our elections are different because all of the issues that other people American elections are fought over are settled here. Like, abortion's legal, it's not going anywhere. We have a national health care system. Everything's great and good. The only issue that anyone ever votes on is just security. Who's going to keep us safe? And Netanyahu in her mind has done the best job. In her words, fewer Jews have died under his rule than at any other point. So she's like, I might be tempted to vote blue and white, but then what are they going to do in terms of security? Like, as if that party, I'm sure, they're going to immediately recognize Palestine and open up the Gaza Strip or something.
Yeah, there's almost no daylight between Netanyahu and Gantz on the Palestinian issue. I mean,
So, what are they?
Netanyahu has argued that Gantz is like some kind of peacenik who's going to, open up Israel to the Arabs or whatever. But, on its face, that's a ridiculous argument, given Gantz's background as the ex-chief of staff of the IDF.
He's been running with ads bragging about what a great job he did organizing and directing
bombing
Cast
Gaza, basically.
Yeah. It's like, do you remember Cast Lead? I kicked the shit out of him.
Right.
And also, I mean, we should not let this go talking about the Israeli election without mentioning that, over the last even days or weeks, I mean, they have been fucking going hog wild on the border with Gaza. They've killed with sniper rifles probably, 50 or 60 people over the last couple weeks.
I mean, there have been exchanges of fire. There were a couple of rockets that were fired out of Gaza that didn't, as usual. There was one that hit a house kind of outside of Tel Aviv and injured some people. And then, of course, they respond with massive airstrikes against everything in the Gaza Strip. The things have been quiet the last few days. There's been some talk that Israel and Hamas may even be circling some kind of a ceasefire deal, like a real ceasefire deal. Egypt has been trying to broker something like that for a while now. So you kind of have to wait and see. Hamas has been talking pretty openly about this, that they're close to cutting a deal. The Israelis don't want to say anything. Netanyahu especially doesn't want to say anything right now while the election is looming. So there may be some news from there soon. It kind of depends on whether things remain relatively calm or they get back to rockets and airstrikes again.
And we should definitely point out that in the run-up here, that the Trump administration has certainly showed their preference by giving Netanyahu the gift of recognizing Israeli control of the Golan Heights.
Oh, yeah.
Correct. Yes.
Little quid pro quo there for all the help Netanyahu gave in 2016.
For those of you who aren't aware, Derek, could you give a little background on the Golan Heights? I mean, this was territory that's like disputed between Israel and Syria that Israel basically took over during which war?
The 6-Day War in 1967, the same war where Israel took over Gaza and the West Bank and East Jerusalem. It's sort of the other occupied territory that nobody really talks about anymore.
What is in the Golan Heights? Like, what is there?
I mean, there's mostly kind of little farming communities and houses. There are some Israeli settlements that they've built in the decades since 1967. Mostly the Golan's value is strategic. The Syrian military, because the Golan sits kind of on a it's the Golan Heights, so
it's in the heights.
Right. It sits above kind of a lot of Israeli territory down below it. The Syrian military used the Golan as a staging area for its artillery and rockets that they fired into Israel periodically. Often after the Israelis would do something to antagonize, like they'd do something to kind of mess around in the Golan, and then Syria would respond, and Israel would say, "Oh God, we're under attack. This can't stand." And so they seized it in 1967, and they've been holding it. Basically insisting that they can't give it back because Syria is a hostile government, and they'll, put artillery back on the heights and start shelling Israeli towns and cities again. Especially in the last, 7 or 8 years, obviously because of the Syrian civil war, there's been very little talk about Israel giving the Golan back. Even before that, there really wasn't, because a lot of people in the international community bought into this idea that for defensive reasons, Israel couldn't give it back. But especially in the past few years, there's been no talk about this. So there was no kind of impetus from the international community or anything for Israel to give up the Golan. There was nothing kind of looming in that regard. This was really just an election present from Trump to his pal Netanyahu.
But I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but in the post-World War II international order, acquisition of territory through military conquest is a big no-no, right?
Yes, it's forbidden. It's like the one thing. If international law since World War II means anything, it means you can't conquer territory by force anymore. And now the Israelis say, and Netanyahu has tried to fashion this exception to international law that because he claims Israel took the Golan in a defensive war or in a defensive military action, that it's legitimate. But the problems with that are, first of all, it's debatable. It's very debatable whether the 6-Day War was a defensive war. The Israelis claim that it was a preemptive war, and that they were about to be attacked by Egypt and Syria and Jordan. But in point of fact, Israel fired the first shots of that war. I mean, if there was an aggressor in the most immediate sense, it was Israel. And the second problem is there is no exception to international law for a defensive war, right? Like you just can't take territory by conquest, period. That's the standard.
Well, here's some more good news coming from Israel and Palestine. The elusive peace deal, peace in the Middle East, it could happen. Reporting today in the Daily Beast, Betsy Woodruff and Oswin have said that our old friend Ellen Dershowitz is on the case now. Writing here, Alan Dershowitz, the celebrity lawyer famous in the Trump era for criticizing the president's legal antagonists on Fox News, has consulted with senior White House officials on efforts to negotiate a peace deal between the Israelis and Palestinians. I've consulted with them about it, Dershowitz told the Daily Beast on Tuesday. He said he had discussed the issue with Jared Kushner, Special Envoy Jason Greenblatt, Ambassador David Friedman, and President Trump himself. So the Jared squad is adding another member, and if you've got the Dersh on the case, that's a deal. That's a deal right there.
He got Netanyahu. He got Netanyahu and Abbas to sit down and hash it all out over a nice big cheese pizza.
I mean, my original reaction to this, I was like, oh, they're sending Dershowitz to Israel? What did Netanyahu kill his wife or something? And here he says right here in the Daily, he says, this is Dershowitz speaking of the Golan Heights. He said, I compared the Golan Heights to a captured battleship. He said, you don't give back a battleship you've captured in a defensive war. So, you don't change horses in midstream. You don't give back battleships in defensive wars.
Yes, definitely. Like 18th century maritime law should be the standard that we use here, as opposed to international law since World War II. It just makes sense.
But yeah, no, we are sending our best over there. Jared Kushner and Alan Dershowitz.
Jesus, that's a grim concept. I mean, Kushner's peace plan, which he says he's going to unveil after the election, the Palestinian Authority has already said it's dead on arrival, and the administration has done so many things to just kind of deliberately antagonize the Palestinians, believing, I think, that if you just bash these people down enough, they'll accept whatever slop you offer them. And so, we've had the recognition of Jerusalem and the embassy move. You've got the Golan now, which doesn't really affect the Palestinians, but is still part and parcel of this sort of Israel gets whatever it wants idea. They've cut aid to the UN Relief Works Agency, which handles Palestinian refugee issues, basically trying to eliminate that agency and just define Palestinian refugees out of existence. And I think much like the strategy that they've used with a number of other kind of sort of opponents of the United States around the world, I think they're going to find that you can't, like, the beatings will continue until morale improves. It's not really a standard for international negotiations. It doesn't get people inclined to talk to you and really listen to what you're trying to say.
So we won't get to see the Kushner plan until after the Israeli elections, but when we do get to see it, I'm willing to bet a huge feature of it will getting both sides, both Abbas and Netanyahu, to agree to buy 666 Park Avenue.
I'm sure it's going to be, on the table somewhere.
Yeah, if we can get them together on one shitty building that's been losing money ever since he bought it, that's the first step. Imagine how, and then what if they have to live and work together in 666 Park Avenue?
They have to fix the toilets together.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Interview doormen.
And and then lose money.
And then just continually
continue to
lose
hemorrhage money on their idiotic real estate speculation.
That's truly an odd couple for the 21st century. That would be a good sitcom, I think.
Moving on from Israel, here's another global hotspot. How about Venezuela? Venezuela continues to vex U.S. policymakers. But Derek, I'm gonna just state this, and you can tell me if I'm wrong or not. This is just my impression of what's going on in Venezuela right now, or at least from the American blob perspective. I think it's actually kind of heartening to see just how badly this coup attempt has turned out so far, because it has not been impressive. If you were hoping for regime change, if you were hoping to get Maduro out of there quick, it has not gone the way. Just the idea that Guaido or whatever just came to America, and then Marco Rubio and Mike Pence were like, great, yeah, we got it. All those generals, they support you. And then just nothing happens. You can't be feeling too great about that if you want to see Maduro out of there.
It's like the Bay of Pigs if everyone involved had a massive head injury.
It's certainly a far cry from the case that the Bush administration made for intervening in Iraq. The plan here seems to have been to have Guaido just kind of announce, which he did in January, okay, I'm the president now, and the whole Venezuelan political system would just kind of fall in line. Like the military would turn on Maduro, everybody would just say, oh, okay, you're the president now, here we go. And yeah, none of that has happened, and he clearly doesn't have any idea what to do at this point, and neither, it seems, does the Trump administration. Like the expectation was that this would happen very quickly, and nothing changed, and now they're just kind of white knuckling it and trying to figure out another way forward. Basically.
Well, I think the way forward pretty clearly from now is that they are going. I mean, all the people who, of course, are in this country were so terrified and concerned for all the horrible misery and deprivation caused by a basically collapsed economy in Venezuela. Well, now their strategy is going to be make everything even more desperate and miserable there through, increasing sanctions and the blackouts and things like that. I mean, it's very clear that what they're going to do now is basically just squeeze and starve the country until they hope the military defects.
Yes. I mean, they've already done it. They cut Venezuela's oil exports. They cut off Venezuela's oil exports. That's it. I mean, that was like the nuclear option, short of actually, I guess, nuking Venezuela.
They're probably thinking about that too. I mean,
after they got owned so badly, because the root of the whole fuck up is that Guaido overpromised his ability to peel off members of the military, and they ended up getting like 50 guys or something, and then the U.S. was like, oh shit, they had no plan B because they never had any plan to actually militarily intervene first. They didn't have anything set up with any of their allies like Brazil or Colombia to actually do the dirty work. So when they couldn't basically they wanted to foment, if not a coup, a civil war using military defectors, and they just never got it. And yeah, now their only thing they can do is just make things worse and worse for people in Venezuela, and then say, oh my God, look what Maduro's doing. Classic American style, stop hitting yourself foreign policy.
And Derek, I got here, there's an article in the Washington Post that ran this week that I think basically sums up the kind of blob thinking on this. Comes courtesy of Jackson Deal. There's a name I haven't heard in a while. Him and Fred Hyatt are really like the Beavis and Butthead of like dipshit neoconservative American policy as far as newspapers go. But
blob takes.
Yeah, the headline here is Trump's intervention in Venezuela has stalled because Caracas knows he's bluffing. And he writes here, to date, however, the campaign has had virtually no effect on its intended target. There have been no significant defections of Venezuelan generals and no sign of any move against Maduro, who has remained entrenched in the presidential palace, even as opposition demonstrations have sputtered. The drive to replace Maduro with National Assembly leader Juan, how do you pronounce his name again? Juan Guaido, which has been the Trump administration's most robust foreign policy initiative after the attempt to disarm North Korea, has stalled. The problem here is not the Russians and their mostly for-show intervention. More important is the corruption of senior military leaders and the malign influence of the thousands of Cuban advisors embedded in the chain of command. That line there made me raise my eyebrow. I hadn't heard of these Cuban advisors, but they seem to have found the culprit here, and it's the Cuban advisors still bedeviling, the world's most powerful country.
Yeah, that's quite an argument, I guess. I mean, Cuba is sort of, when it comes to Latin America, there's sort of the catch-all evildoer. Like if there's a regime in Latin America that we don't like, it's because Cuba is involved. Jair Bolsonaro, when he came into office in Brazil, kicked the Cuban doctors out, basically immiserating his own people, just to kind of demonstrate that he's on the right side of history, or that he's opposed to Cuba. And yeah. That's a bit of a stretch, it seems to me. I think what they were hoping for was Not so much the generals. I mean, Maduro has done a pretty good job of kind of buying the generals' allegiance. He's spent into Venezuela's gold reserves, and he's used oil revenue, and he's kind of made it worth the generals' while to stick with him. I think the hope was probably that you'd get a lot of like colonels and majors and captains. As you go down the chain of command, you get closer to people who are not as insulated from the hardships that Venezuelan people are facing as the generals probably are. And so the hope was maybe that you get a bunch of those guys to turn on Maduro. Maybe their loyalty to Maduro wouldn't be as strong. But yeah, I mean, it's been a total bust, and there clearly was no thought given to the idea that, what are we going to do if this doesn't work? Like if we have our guy go out there and announce that he's the president now, and everybody kind of shrugs their shoulders and says, no, not really. We're not going to pay attention to you. Like, what do we do then? There doesn't seem to have been any thought given to that.
Instead, they have to just go out there and say, well, for the 60th year in a row, we got owned by Cuba.
Yeah, exactly.
Tiny, poor island with a fraction of our GDP.
But
and foreign policy apparatus owned us again.
I mean, but I mean, aside from the top tier generals who, assuming that he's paid them off, or that it's worth it in their bank account not to defect or whatever. I mean, wouldn't he not necessarily have to Maduro's a great leader, or assume that all of Venezuela's miseriation is due entirely to the United States? But what do you think accounts for the ongoing pretty staunch loyalty of the Venezuelan military?
I mean, it's an interesting question. I guess the argument. I mean, a lot of these guys may be loyal to their own generals, and their generals are loyal to Maduro, and it just kind of flows, upward like that. I mean, I think the more the United States demands that Maduro go, the more likely it is that soldiers in the Venezuelan military are going to say, screw you guys. We're not interested in what the United States wants. We're not here to do America's bidding. And the more closely Guaido is identified as being kind of the Trump administration's man in Caracas, the less credibility he has to talk to these people and try to turn them to his side. It's the same problem you see in other places. I mean, you see it in Iran. There's this sort of question about how much should the United States openly be calling for regime change, and how much does that discredit the internal opposition to the Iranian government? And it's in other places as well, but I think that dynamic is playing out to some degree in Venezuela. The more the United States kind of openly pushes for these things, the more resistance there is to going along with it.
And I mean, I'm sure conditions in Venezuela for the average Venezuelan probably pretty much sucks right about now. But in your mind, is there any productive role for America or the international community, in quotes, to play here in terms of aid or medicine, food, things like that? I mean, it's always complicated when the United States is involved in things like this, because it's there's a carrot and a stick always here, and the delivery, the actual delivery of the aid is also sort of questionable. But is there any? I guess what I'm saying is there any productive role for America or any other country to in terms of just alleviating the suffering?
Lift the fucking sanctions. How about that?
Yeah, you could lift the sanctions. That would help in a more immediate sense. I think the best thing the United States could do would be to shut up. I mean, the part of the problem here, in terms of alleviating kind of the immediate suffering of the Venezuelan people, you could do that with humanitarian aid. but the whole concept of humanitarian aid in Venezuela has become so politicized now, mostly because the United States and Guaido have politicized it. I mean, Guaido did that stunt in February where he was like, I'm going to bring aid into the country, and that's going to prove that I'm the legitimate president of Venezuela. And it went completely bust. And of course it did. I mean, Maduro wouldn't let it in. And why would he? I mean, when it's presented as a direct challenge to his authority and his legitimacy, why would he have let that aid in?
Especially when the guy from America overseeing it was Elliot Abrams, a guy who we know for a fact in the 1980s used humanitarian fucking shipments to Nicaragua to smuggle guns to the fucking Contra.
Well, yeah, exactly. That's what I mean by like, the United States getting involved in aid is a little complicated because I'd be really interested
because
to
they're
see,
accepting aid from not America.
Yeah, exactly.
Of course. But
right. I mean, even a lot of international NGOs didn't want any part of that humanitarian aid stunt. I keep calling it a stunt.
It was
because it was so politicized. So I think
wasn't
the best thing.
But they set fire to their own fucking trucks.
No, Matt. I was just about to ask it. Wasn't there like an actual like false flag where like they were like, oh, the Maduro they threw a Molotov cocktail and they're blowing up the aid.
Yeah.
But it was just like. A video showed it was clearly their own supporters who set fire to their own
and
convoy.
then the New York Times retracted that like a week after spending the time saying that Maduro's military set fire to the trucks. Just
right.
astounding.
And after, by the way, Marco Rubio said, the Venezuelan military has just attacked a truck in Colombia. The United States stands ready to aid the Colombians in defending their border. Like this was like the
Gulf of Tonkin.
The start of the war, basically. Yeah.
Yeah. No, they tried to make a Gulf of Tonkin moment there, but their Keystone oath, so it didn't work. But no, I think if you're dealing with somebody in your face yelling about, oh my God, what we need to do something, with that American concept that everything's our responsibility, and if they're suffering, we must alleviate it. Of course, that doesn't refer to a place like Yemen or anything else, but it certainly means Venezuela. And you're talking to like Beatrice de Mengele or whatever the fuck, like that lady from the New York Times,
Joanna
whose
Hausman.
dad is literally an IMF vampire who helped destroy the goddamn economy with fucking structural adjustment and austerity in the 90s, which gave fucking Chavez the road to being the president because they annihilated the goddamn country. Because there's this insane fucking revisionism now where Venezuela was like fucking swinging 60s Acapulco or something until the moment Chavez took power, when in fact structural adjustment had taken the country apart. And this guy helped fucking direct it. And now his UCB improv fail daughter is doing videos about how it's not a good look to oppose regime change. Tell these fucking people we have a responsibility to stop strangling the goddamn country and lift the fucking sanction.
Derek, did you watch that video?
I watched a part of it. I had to tap out.
I mean, it's fucking unbearable.
It was cringeworthy. I mean, even if I agreed with it, which I didn't, like, it was a cringeworthy video. It was just on its presentation.
It was that awful, like, sort of shareable video style where everything is a cut and an edit and this like quirky tone. And the UCB trained comic where she literally says, not a good look. And then she goes on to say, sometimes hands off means blood on your hands. And I'm like, excuse me, like there's blood on my fucking hands because I don't want America to get involved in Venezuela in any way. What does that mean? Like, how about the IMF and World Bank? Well, where are their fucking hands in all this?
Yeah,
and in the video, she does say, she's like, America's history of intervention in Latin America should give us pause, and then just skirts over the fact that the guy literally in charge of America's policy towards Venezuela right now is the guy who should give us pause.
It gave her pause, but they cut that, and then they moved on to the rest.
What
of
are
the video.
What are a few helicopter flights between friends? But the thing is that Felix spoke this woman into fucking being, because it was like a week ago we were talking to, I think, Alex, about how like everyone in the boomer generation is just mask off fascists, like we're talking like Naftali Bennett just saying, yeah, we killed Rabin and we'll kill anybody who tries to get in our way. But how their kids are going to use that millennial passive aggression and it's going to be intersectional fascism. And then a week later, this lady is on the internet going, ooh, anti-interventionism? Ooh, this ain't it, Chief. And I, of course, don't mean that in a way to impugn our Native American fellow citizens.
She also said in that video that she's like, I'm not a Republican.
Now, I am not a pro-Trump military hawk. For reference, my spirit animal is Ruth Bader Ginsburg in workout clothes.
Like, I'm not a hawk. In fact, Ruth Bader Ginsburg in workout clothes is my spirit animal. And I just got to say, I hope she gets canceled for using the phrase spirit animal.
Yeah, exactly. That's appropriation.
Yeah.
Sorry, Baroness Hausman.
No, that was
Your grandpa did a
atrocious.
shitty job in the Paris fucking streets.
It's really funny because Virgil is usually the one who is most reticent to talk about foreign policy at all. But, he got everyone super pissed off at him today because he just basically said, if Maduro was like the tyrannical dictator that he's supposed to be, why is the main opposition leader allowed to leave the country, literally drum up support for like a CIA-backed military coup against him, and then allowed to return to the country unharmed? Like, if he was like actually as evil, and I'm not even saying like Maduro is a great guy or his leadership of Venezuela has been, flawless or anything, but I mean, A, it's like not really my business, but B, like if he is the world's greatest evil at the moment, like would this Guaido guy be able to move freely around Venezuela and travel out of the country?
I mean, it is an interesting feature of the Maduro totalitarian regime that they haven't put Guaido in prison.
Well, they just ruled that he can't run for re-election, or they just like.
Well, they stripped him of his immunity from prosecution, so he could be tried at this point for leaving the country. There was a ban on his travel while he was doing his CIA world tour, and he could be now prosecuted for that. He could be investigated for declaring himself president, which in many contexts is probably could be considered a crime, and so they may go in that direction now. I mean, I think Maduro has made the calculation that throwing Guaido in jail would make him a martyr. It would invite more trouble than it would alleviate from the rest of the world. And so I think he's decided not to do that. But I mean, obviously, we'll have to wait and see.
And also, he probably has calculated that this goofball is not a real threat to him.
Well, right. I mean, that's part of it. Yeah.
He was going to lead an exodus of troops to do a fucking to do like a training beachhead in Colombia and then like reinvade the country, and it was like 50 dudes who are now stuck in Colombia and they can't get any housing or food, and they're like, what the fuck? I backed the wrong horse.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's all kind of a combination of like Guaido hasn't shown himself to be very good at this, and on top of that, I'm likely to just invite more grief for myself if I try to lock him up.
He got too horny for bras. I have to say though that these people who say a lot, and like the Democrats especially, who say Maduro is a dictator, these are people who want Donald Trump to be thrown in prison for colluding with Russia before an election. What the fuck is literally going to the CIA and saying, please overthrow my government? I mean, that seems like way worse.
That's collusion.
That's real collusion.
Yeah.
That's actual collusion. As opposed to my half-wit son tries to sell a fucking sinking gambling barge that's in Lake Baikal to some fucking Russian mob guys in exchange for a giant sack of like fentanyl and limited edition Beanie Babies.
But what do we actually know about? I mean, I'm asking. I'm curious. Like, what do we know of Guaido himself and the party that he's a member of? Like, where do they fall in terms of like politically, in terms of Venezuela or a kind of international? Like, how would you describe their politics?
I mean, what I know of them, they're internationally speaking on the left. His party is a member of the Socialist International. But like Israel, but sort of in the opposite direction, you have to take it in context. I mean, Venezuelan politics are very they're very, very much further to the left. The center is much further to the left than I think you'd find in the United States, for example. So to say that he's kind of internationally on the left in the context of Venezuela doesn't mean that much. He seems to be for Venezuelan politics more on the right. And I think the fact that he's made himself the front man for basically a right-wing coup effort suggests something about what he's comfortable with in terms of politics. But beyond that, I don't really know. I mean, I'm not terribly familiar with his politics.
All right. Well, how about to close things out? Let's go to another country that's gone mad, isn't it? And I'm talking about our friends across the pond, Great Britain.
It's all balmy, isn't it?
Great Britain, which continues to be, I don't know.
It's a shambles, mate. It's a fucking omni shambles.
Just, I don't know, maybe probably the most embarrassing democracy in the world right now.
They've got us beat.
Amazingly,
They figured out a way to beat us, which is amazing.
Theresa May, just another resounding defeat in Parliament. This fucking Brexit thing is just continues to be astoundingly funny. I'm sorry if you live in the UK, but I mean, sorry, mate. It's hilarious.
I can't wait to go there because we're going on a UK tour in June and just own everyone there the entire time.
It's nobody knows what the fuck
Doing
to do.
my flawless accent
or want.
I will get glassed.
But I just got to read though. The real soothsayer. I mean, Derek, you're aspiring to be like this guy, the true king of the flat globe. I'm talking about Thomas Friedman.
I can't grow a mustache like his. I've tried, but I can't make it happen.
And he turned out an opinion piece for the Times today that is vintage Friedman, and I got to share it with you guys. The headline is the title is "The United Kingdom has gone mad. The problem with holding out for a perfect Brexit plan is that you can't fix stupid." And he,
Well, he would know.
yeah.
That's lit. What is that? Is that one of the fucking like blue collar comedy kings punchline?
Like
Bill Engvall or some shit?
Yeah.
Hey, Theresa May, here's your sign.
So he goes, just skipping ahead just a little bit. It goes, seriously, if you can't take a joke, you shouldn't have come to London right now because there is political farce everywhere. In truth, though, it's not very funny. It's actually tragic. What we're seeing is a country that's determined to commit economic suicide but can't even agree on how to kill itself. It's an epic failure of political leadership. I say, bring back the monarchy. Where have you gone, Queen Elizabeth II? A nation turns its lonely eyes to you. Activate the queen! Activate the bloody queen!
Bloody queen!
So Thomas Friedman
hit her fucking moldering corpse with a goddamn car battery so that she can be awake for 5 minutes to fire everyone and declare martial law.
Stab that adrenaline needle into her heart. Get her up. Get the queen.
Get the queen up, mate.
Tom Friedman has already gone full monarchist, but he goes here.
Put her in her mech suit. You know she has one.
He goes here, seriously, the United Kingdom, the world's fifth largest economy, a country whose elites created modern parliamentary democracy, modern banking and finance, the Industrial Revolution, and the whole concept of globalization. Oh, wait, they're responsible for all of those horrible things?
Wow, they really are a bunch of
Get rid of this shithole country.
Fucking just controlled demolition of the entire island.
This is the United Kingdom, the world's fifth largest economy that brought us such things as those dark satanic mills, Jimmy Savile, imperialism, the Opium Wars, and another and many other unspeakables.
Both kinds, both kinds of Indian genocide.
Concentration camps.
Yeah.
They invented those.
Yes,
well.
they did. But take a bow.
Bring back
that Queen Elizabeth line. The only thing I could think of was when Mr. Burns says to Smithers, "Very well, begin the thawing of Jim Nabors."
He goes here. Yeah, the country that brought us, ritual pederasty, seems dead set on quitting the European Union, the world's largest market for the free movement of goods, capital, services, and labor, without a well-conceived plan, or maybe without any plan at all. Both Conservative and Labour members of Parliament keep voting down one plan after another, looking for the perfect fix, the pain-free exit from the EU. But there is none, because you can't fix stupid.
Dope. Or because, these countries have all been enmeshed in these transnational institutions that have totally abolished national sovereignty in many ways and made it impossible for you to function in a global economy without being part of their network. And they will punish you and make it impossible for you to fucking, dictate your own goddamn destiny economically because of the interdependence and the trade networks. Like, I think it has more to do with it than a fucking Larry the Cable Guy line from 2004. You fucking mustachioed dipshit.
He goes, the entire Brexit choice was presented to the public in 2016 with utterly misleading simplicity. I mean, that's hilarious coming from Thomas Friedman. If you remember some of his hilarious columns about pitching the Iraq War, he was just like,
you just gotta say, suck on this.
Suck on this.
Suck on this. That's pretty simplistic there, Thomas.
Yeah, no, he said American troops need to go door to door and tell Iraqis, you don't like living in the world we've always dreamed of? Well, suck on this.
Yeah.
And he goes here, it was sold with a pack of lies about both the size of the benefits and the ease of implementation, and it continues to be pushed by conservative hardliners who used to care about business but are now obsessed with restoring Britain's sovereignty over any economic considerations. Yeah, it's funny. It's funny how conservatives have given up the ghost on globalization and free market if they can just double down on sovereignty.
Yeah. Well, that's because the whole thing's falling apart. It's not working for people anymore, and they need to find the scapegoats. And even if, in the broad sense, all of these things have been good for the ruling class, they are undermining their credibility in, the putative democracies, and they have to find some reason. But the thing is that, there's a strong left case to get out of the EU, or for the abolition of the fucking EU altogether. But the problem, he has a bit of a correct thing in there, in that the Brexit vote was absurd, because regardless of how you thought Brexit should be handled, what do you think to do with the EU? As leave or not, that was an absurd question, because it didn't tell you what the terms were going to be. And that's why it's been this 2-year clusterfuck, because nobody has any idea of what the mandate is, because there has to be an agreement of some kind, and there's been no ability to create a consensus across parties or even with the general public on what that alternative is. And so it's just been finding out that every single one is unpopular and it can't pass. Every single alternative. They had a vote where they let them all pick, they had 8 options, and they voted yes or no on all of them, and every single one failed by different margins, but every single one failed. Astounding.
So it wouldn't be a Thomas Friedman column unless he didn't include, even better than the apocryphal cab driver, he does love speaking to the real heroes here, who are corporate CEOs. In this case, the CEO of Airbus. And I'm going to skip these paragraphs, but basically he just uses this guy. He basically publishes the Airbus CEO's threat to the British people that, we can always build our planes elsewhere. And, Brexit is making us more likely to do that. So, he's like, if you like Brexit, I hope you don't like jobs. So the CEO of Airbus, he's sort of laundering that point of view in the column. But he goes on, he says, I understand the grievances of many of those who voted to leave the EU. For starters, they felt swamped by EU immigrants. There are reportedly some 300,000 French citizens living in London, which would make it one of the biggest French cities in the world. I had a drink with a member of parliament in the bar in the House of Commons on Tuesday, and as we sat down, he whispered to me that, quote, not a single person working in this whole building is British, which is first of all, I'd like to know the name of that guy. That sounds insane and paranoid, and it sounds like the ravings of a madman. And also, he says that I understand the grievances. There's 300,000 French people living in England? What is this,
I can understand that.
Yeah, well.
The French? Ooh.
Yeah, but I don't. The complaint isn't with the French people who moved to Britain. It's with the Poles and the Czechs and the other Eastern European, Central and Eastern European migrants that have come to Britain. Those are the ones who were demonized by the pro-Brexit side, kind of on the right, during the referendum campaign.
And he goes, I also get the resentment of Brits at having regulations set by faceless EU bureaucrats in Brussels. And I get their resentment at the globalized urban elites who those in the rural areas here believed look down at them. And I get the squeeze on middle-class wages here that gets blamed unfairly on the EU and immigrants the way that President Trump blames Mexicans. I get all of that. But I also get what it means to be a leader in the 21st century. I love that, he spends those 2 paragraphs just being like, yeah, all of you fucking hicks and lunatics angry about Polish plumbers taking your jobs away. I get you. I hear you. but I also understand what it means to be a leader in the 21st century.
Which
so
means,
how about you shut the fuck up?
What it means to be a leader is to fucking tell people to suck on this.
Yeah.
We told Iraq to suck on this, and now you have to tell your own rest of populations to suck on this.
Yeah.
And that's the insane hollowness in the center of all of these guys, all of these elite pundits who talk about like macroeconomic shit and foreign policy stuff, is at the end of the day, they will always have a paragraph where they say, yeah, there's a reason that people are upset with these institutions. There's a reason that there's a crisis of legitimacy. But at the end of the day, we're in charge for a reason to shut the fuck up. Like, but the thing is that does not help you. That doesn't. I mean, no one's going to find that convincing. I mean, none of these people read your shit anyway.
Thomas Friedman isn't running for office anywhere, so he can tell people.
He's just telling the elites who have to deal with this.
He's giving them a script so that they can say things like, "I understand your grievances,
I feel your pain."
Yeah,
Right.
exactly.
Right.
But he goes here. I get what it means to be a leader in the 21st century, and it sure doesn't mean asserting your sovereignty over all other considerations or breaking out of the giant EU market where the UK sends over 40% of its exports without a serious national discussion of the costs and benefits. This is my favorite part. He goes, what do the most effective leaders today have in common? They wake up every morning and ask themselves the same questions. What world am I living in? Is that the most effective leader or the most senile one?
Yeah. Do I smell toast?
Where
Who
am
are my
I?
grandchildren?
What day is it?
Why is my left arm numb?
He goes, they wake up every morning and ask themselves the same questions. What world am I living in? What are the biggest trends?
How did I get here?
What are the biggest trends in this world? And how do I educate my citizens?
Trends in this world. Tamagotchis are coming back.
And how do I educate my citizens about this world and align my policies so that more of my people can get the best out of these trends and cushion the worst?
Look at that. That's he's saying it. He's saying you wake up and you jack into the global capitalist hive supercomputer that tells you what's happening, and then your job is just to sell it to your idiot rube citizens. There's no changing anything. They have no control over their destiny. You don't even have control over everything. You are completely at the mercy of this machinery.
No.
And your job is to pitch it to people to prevent them from tearing the whole thing down.
Yeah, exactly. The most effective leaders are the ones who can, craft a narrative so that the shitheads who live in their country will have, understand the real cost benefit and, have cushioned the blow of telling them that, in fact, they all have to accept a much dramatically lowered standard of living. Yeah. But I love the idea about the first thing they think about when they wake up every morning. What world am I living in? And I just had an image reading that of Mohammed bin Salman just with the Victorian sleeping cap on and then just eyes open, bolt upright, eyes glowing, real shit. What world am I living in? What trends can I think about today?
How many Falcons am I going to buy today?
Yeah.
How many gold-plated Falcons am I going to purchase? But
I'm imagining one of these guys waking up one morning and reading about the Juicero. A Wi-Fi enabled juicer. That's where things are going today. All right, let's do it.
I mean, he doesn't name who the most effective.
No,
of course not, because he probably is. He's probably thinking of Angela Merkel or something. But the real answer is Erdogan and fucking Netanyahu, MBS, and Putin. Those are the actual most effective leaders.
And guess what they're using to paper over the cost-benefit analysis? Hardcore, insane nationalism
and violent,
and violent
warfare.
Repression, and war,
both internal and external.
Yeah. So, God, it keeps getting better. This is just such vintage this is he's given us the hits here. So he goes, what world are we living in? For starters, we're living in a world that is becoming so interconnected.
Are we
living in the future we always dreamed of?
Yes, indeed.
Thomas!
Yes, indeed we are. And this is my favorite part. He goes, we're living in a world that is becoming so interconnected. And then he goes here in dashes. Thanks to digitization, the internet, broadband, mobile devices, the cloud, and soon to be 5G wireless transmissions. And I just love this because I was like, wow, Tom is really padding out the word count on this call. You just said the internet 6 times, dude.
I'm surprised that he didn't throw in information superhighway. That's a lot more syllables.
Massive multiplayer online role-playing games. Fortnite, Apex Legends.
Chat forums, something awful. 4chan, 8chan.
And he goes, that we are becoming interdependent to an unprecedented degree. Again, does Thomas Friedman have an editor at the New York Times?
No,
'Cause
they don't edit
Yeah,
him.
they don't edit him. It's like, you've been turning in the same fucking column for 15 years now,
It's
dude.
just that Common commercial.
Yeah.
Every single one is just the fucking Common
And he
commercial.
goes, in this world, growth increasingly depends on the ability of yourself, your community, your town, your factory, your school, and your country to be connected more and more to the flows of knowledge and investment, and not just rely on the stocks of stuff. Okay, so in the interdependent, interconnected world, you have your school, your factory, your town, your government needs to think about flows, not stocks. And he goes, over centuries, notes John Hagel, who currently co-heads Deloitte's Center for the Edge. How is that a real thing?
The Center for Edging. It's the Center for Edging.
The Center for the Edge.
We have never nutted in this building, and we never will.
The guy who co-heads the Center for Edging says business has, quote, been organized around stocks of knowledge as the basis for value creation. The key to creating economic value has been to acquire some proprietary knowledge stocks, aggressively protect those knowledge stocks, and then efficiently extract the economic value from those knowledge stocks and deliver them to the market.
Gibberish!
The challenge in a more rapidly changing world is that knowledge stocks depreciate at an accelerating rate.
What?
In this kind of world, the key source of economic value shifts from stocks to flows. It's the interconnected, interdependent, cloud-based world is experiencing a heavy flow at the moment.
Oh, I got to get that knowledge flow and not those knowledge stocks. Oh, I'm shorting the knowledge stocks.
What does any of this mean?
It's
I have no
gibberish.
clue.
These all. I'm convinced that every one of these groups, these things, all these think tanks, like not part of it is it's their court ideologues, court economists who are there just to justify in the minds of the billionaires of the elite why what they're doing is right. But I think also it's just a make work program for their idiot nephews and stuff.
That's who works at the Center for
Yeah,
Edging.
exactly.
Yeah.
It's like a wonk version of like a handbag line for your bored third wife.
So I'm skipping ahead here. Just there's even more drivel that's not worth reading. He goes, the wisest leaders also understand that all the big problems today are global problems, and they only have global solutions.
I mean, by definition, the big problems would be global, since that's the largest unit.
And I am talking about climate change, trade rules, technology standards, and preventing excesses and contagion in financial markets. What is preventing contagion?
Contagion in financial markets.
You got stocks in my bonds. I got bonds in your stocks.
The NASDAQ took a beating today after a bird flu outbreak. All the traders.
You call your broker and you say, I'm sorry, your portfolio has AIDS.
If you check the T-cell count on the bond markets lately, it's bad. He goes here, if your country wants to have a say in how those problems are solved, and your country's name is not America, Russia, China, or India, you need to be part of a wider coalition like the European Union. The UK membership in the EU has given it an outsized voice in world affairs. Again, I would like Britain to use more of their indoor voice in world affairs. Yeah. I mean, sorry, buddy.
Be nice.
After World War II, you
great.
can just sort of, bye.
Yeah.
But, it goes here. And there's one more thing the best leaders know. A little history. Trump is fine with a world of competitive European nationalisms, not a strong European Union. So is Vladimir Putin. So, it seems, are the Brexiteers. How quickly they've all forgotten that the EU and NATO were built to prevent the very competitive nationalism that ran riot in Europe in the 20th century and brought us 2 world wars.
NATO was built to counter the Soviet Union. It wasn't built for that.
And they hired a bunch of Nazis to staff it.
Jesus Christ.
That's called knowing a little history. Let's put on our history caps here. So he goes, sorry to be so despondent, but I went to graduate school here on a Marshall Scholarship from the British government, was married here, and started as a journalist on Fleet Street in London. I like the place, but this is not the reasonably competent British government I grew up with.
These aren't the guys where Anthony Eden did a bunch of poppers and tried to invade Egypt.
It's being led by a ship of fools, a conservative party bloc that is now radical in its obsession with leaving Europe, and a Labour Party that has gone Marxist. Oh, okay. Thanks for that.
Can't
Thanks for
have
Thomas.
that.
Can't have that happen. If the people here can't force their politicians to compromise with one another and with reality, there's still a glimmer of hope that this might happen. There is going to be a crack up of the British political system and some serious economic pain. This is scary. So concludes the Thomas Friedman column. Ooh.
And the nationalization was the nationalized healthcare system was hanging from the door of the car.
Yeah, the truck driver was flashing his headlights because he was trying to warn you. Marxists were in the back of the car the
It's
whole
a load of
time.
bollocks, isn't it?
No, but I mean, I'd be okay with a United Kingdom with a significantly diminished role on the
Yeah, they
world
need to
affairs.
settle the fuck down, guys.
But yeah, that is Thomas Friedman, ladies and germs, about what it means to be a leader in the world today, which basically means doing things that are horrendously unpopular but avoiding any kind of democratic accountability for those decisions.
Yeah, it rules.
I think that about does it for us today. But Derek, you've got some new digs for your newsletter.
Yeah, I'm on Substack now. I've got a new site there called Foreign Exchanges. The URL is fx, the letters fx.substack.com. The newsletter is $5 a month or $50 if you pay for a full year. I'm running a discount, 20% discount for the rest of this month because it's my first month there. So yeah, I mean, if you've seen my stuff at and that's the way it was, or just heard me on here, or just feel like giving me your money, please check it out. And
I would encourage all our listeners to get in on the ground floor of this immense knowledge flow.
Yeah, this is gonna be this is a bear market, or no? I'm sorry. This is a bull market in knowledge. This is a bull
knowledge flow.
If I was Jim Cramer, I would say you got to get in on this. Bye.
So yeah, if you're a fan of Chapo, I'm sure you're familiar with Derek's work and writing, or if this is your first time, I would very much encourage you to check him out. And we will include the link to Foreign Exchanges in the show description. Derek, once again, thank you so much for joining us and taking us on a trip around the world.
Sure, thanks for having me, guys.
And before we go, we have two plugs for you. This Saturday, April 6th at Littlefield, we will be appearing on stage at a live show with our friends Brett and Brian from Street Fight. They're coming to Brooklyn, and we will be guesting with them on stage at Littlefield this Saturday night. So please check out tickets for that. Links will be in the description. And also, on May 1st, on May Day, at Housing Works in Brooklyn, we will be doing a charity fundraising show that is a night of pub trivia with Chapo Trap House. We're gonna be administering a classic pub quiz to you guys.
Yeah, every one of us will write one category, and then we will have the teams compete to see who does best.
We will 5 rounds. I think probably like 10 questions each, but each round is a different Chapo host will be responsible for the questions. So if you think like, oh, I'm smart, I can kill it at trivia. True, you stand a good chance, but keep in mind that Felix will be doing one of these categories, and being intelligent is not necessarily the best strategy for answering the questions he will come up with.
It's really a crapshoot because you don't know what he's been marinating his brain in the media up because this is a month away. We have no idea what he's going to. Right now, it's Game of Thrones and Red Fox for some reason, but we have no idea what it's going to be. It could be anything.
It is anyone's game to win.
It could be like Danish silent films.
Unlikely.
But hey, was Red Fox? Did you see that one coming? Did you have that on your fucking card?
Nope.
It could be anything. It could be Jacobian revenge dramas.
No, it could be the Revenger's Tragedy. Felix's favorite new book. No, I think it might be the famous Danish silent film Haxen, Witchcraft Throughout the Ages.
Yes.
All right. So check out us at Littlefield with Street Fight this Saturday, and then May Day at Housing Works in Brooklyn